Welcome to tips and tricks for diagnosing inactive fault codes. You'll have to excuse me, I'm going to have to narrate the beginning of this video because there was so much noise in my shop, and my alter ego will take over in real time with the recording later in the video. So inactive fault codes. These are tricky because how do you fix something that's not currently broken? Well, hopefully this video will help straighten some of this out. First of all, hooking up. Most trucks use this 9-pin serial port connector these days. I always recommend you hardwire your RP 1210 compliant device to your laptop or computer, because even though they are Wi-Fi and Bluetooth compatible, we all know that those things can be glitchy at times. So hardwire it in with a USB cord. Straight to your truck. You can use any Cummins Caterpillar device as long as it's RP1210 compliant. They should all be compatible. This is usually where you plug in for an old first generation Freightliner, but you see how the customers got their own it's either a GPS or a data logging or both device plugged in. You're always going to want to try to unplug their devices and hook as close to the truck as you can. You can get away with using the jumper ports with those things sometimes, but like I said, you want to get rid of any kind of glitchy operations. If they try to ping in their system in the middle of your operation, it could lock you out of your software for whatever reason. Sometimes it even causes fault codes. So first of all, and this is a very important step, generalize your entire fault code screen. This customer came in with the complaint, well, this truck was towed in with a complaint of it shuts down on the driver. Obviously, that's a very bad thing to happen. So we want to look at everything on the screen, and for a couple reasons. My main reason, number one, is obviously you don't want this truck shutting down, but you also don't want the driver to come pick up his truck, bring it right back and say, hey, now there's another problem. In this truck, it might be, hey, now my fuel gauge isn't working, because there's also a fault code in here for similar to that. But you want to look at all the fault codes. You want to rule anything out that isn't critical. Like here we're looking at the ACM message, and this is probably the most likely, so I'm kind of looking at this one first. What dates it happened. Happened about a half hour, and you can look at how many counts it happened. 5 counts on this one. When you go into the data counter, estimated data counter right there, and it says 5 times right there. So this one is pretty critical, and it's probably going to shut him down, but we want to look at all the faults before we start delving into troubleshooting a single fault. Now here there's also another ACM fault, after treatment control module DPF zone condition. This is an information fault code, and it's really is an accompanying fault code, and there usually is another fault code that had set either at that time and cleared itself over a drive cycle, or this might actually be saying, hey, the fault code we originally looked at, which is probably shutting it down, happened, and we set off a check engine light to let the driver know that he's only got a certain amount of time to get off the road. So it's an information fault. A zone 2 condition is a very general thing to say. So we looked at how often it happened and when it happened, but it's probably not critical. This one was a light out. Whoopity-doo. Looks like it's been fixed. So over here under the status, you see there's active, not active. This is where it would say active also. Previously confirmed, previously active, confirmed, previously active, permanent. Permanent's important because it's usually after treatment related. Since after treatment systems are government regulated, basically they say you can only put a certain amount of poisons in the atmosphere. They say if you are putting too much poison in the atmosphere, you must shut your truck down. Or if we can't even see how many poisons you're putting into the atmosphere, we must shut your truck down, which is the case here. When we lose communication to the after treatment control module, we're just going to have to shut you down. So we're going to start opening some troubleshooting now that we've got a generalization of everything going on here. Even though there was a fuel level sensor fault, that was a long time ago. So it's either been fixed by another tech and they didn't bother to clear this, or the driver noticed it was unplugged, plugged it back in, something like that. Okay, so here we're going in, looking at, we're going to rule this out as any kind of shutdown issue. This is the one. This is for information only. We set off a light to let your driver know a stationary regen is required if the fault code is active. No action required for inactive fault codes. So forget about this fault. We're okay with it. Let's get out of it. We can go through and clear the fault codes, which I'll do later on in here. I like to take a picture of all the fault codes in that screen before I did anything. So I already have that in my phone, along with the unit number, and that records the date, time, and everything. So if I ever need to look back in the history, if the truck comes back in a week and still has a problem, I'll be able to look at it, which is quite often the case with inactive fault codes. You can't find the problem, you do your due diligence and let the guy go. But in this case, it's shutting him down, so I'm not going to let him go. Okay, now we're in the ACM message not receiving. We can see the counter screen. Occurrence counter is open to 5 counts. We see it happen on, what's that say, the 23rd, about a half hour apart. And so that was 5 days ago when I had recorded this video. It was 5 days prior, so it might have been sitting at this parking lot waiting to be towed to our shop for a couple days. It came in the previous day on a tow truck to me. So we're looking at it, and there it is. Engine reaction. If this fault code goes live, active, 30 seconds it will shut you down. Now, I think my alter ego voice will be taking over for this video soon, so we have to excuse his rudeness. But when he does, I'll shut up and go drink a beer or something. Okay, so here we're looking at the troubleshooting screen, and even though it's a great idea to go through and like I said, generalize all the troubleshooting steps before even starting troubleshooting, we already know the code is not active.
The real complicated part of this type of fault code is, as we showed, it's inactive. So troubleshooting an inactive fault code that's only happened 5 times, confirmed previously active permanent, can be tricky. It might only happen during a regen. And that's when the ACM is really, required to do its probably biggest workload of computations is during regen. It's looking at all the sensors. It's very high temperature. You run an 1100 Fahrenheit in the DPF unit, so you really need to get in there and look and see what it's doing during a regen. So I'm probably going to do a regen and see if I can recreate this code. I don't want to test drive it after knowing that it actually shut down on the driver. And it had to be towed in just for safety reasons. I didn't want to put it back, so I don't want to do a test drive. I'm probably going to do a regen, which is also one of the ways you can put the truck through one of its most extreme conditions if you're testing something that isn't active, related to after treatment or even engine components. Because if your Detroit has an engine brake set up, that will be running. The EGR system will be running. There are several systems running in conjunction to get this so hot, to get the truck so hot that it does a couple things. It burns all the soot, turns it into ash in the DPF filter. It also, the SCR system will be kicking in, shooting in your DEF fluid because it's a reductant. Basically, you're creating a lot of nitrogen oxide, which is poison, from having it run so hot. So as you're cleaning out the DPF, you're also making a lot of NOx, so you have to have your SCR system running full bore also to clean up all the NOx, so you can check your NOx sensors and everything like that. So we're going to go ahead and do a regen on this truck. Okay, always follow the simple precautions before doing a regen. Walk around the truck, make sure there's no debris, make sure you're not parked over the top of leaves or oil spill, electrical cords, anything like that, because it can melt or ignite things around it. It gets pretty hot, and sometimes up to an hour on a regen. Or if you're doing an SCR performance test, you could be well over an hour. So make sure you're clear of anything hot. Make sure you know, everybody around you knows that don't lean on the exhaust, things of that nature. But here we're going to be going to service routines, and I'm going to make a lot of noise so you're not going to. Now what I'm going to do when I start this test, I mean, this is good basic screen to have for monitoring. I say basic because there's more details you can actually look at. So this just tells you basically on the screen the same thing, redundant. fuel injection, doser status. And this is all good to look at if you're just doing a basic regeneration. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be coming down, doing a regeneration, and I'm going to be watching it really close on my instrumentation screen. And what I want to watch for is the moment that fault code, you see here's all your fault code, message not received or has stopped arriving, the fuel sensor, we don't care about that, zone 2 condition. Okay, so we know that might be related, but that was kind of older too. So we know this one will do the shutdown that the driver's seeing, so this one's very important. But what I'm going to do is go through the chart, click all the things that I want to see during this regen, and this is what I'm going to be watching. So let's go ahead and see if I can clear this here. Clear it. Okay, and I'm going to choose the things that I want to see. The nice thing about Detroit is they have a search function here. So let's just type in ACM and see what comes up. Temperature, no, transmission or speed, vehicle speed. No, we don't want to really know that. Okay, so we're just going to look at let's look at our NOx sensors, inlet and outlet, because if the ACM stops communicating, so will the NOx sensors. I see how many things it looks at. Not all of these are always active in every truck, but they're available here. NOx difference, NOx sensor value, raw emissions, referencing value, temperature. Let's see, what do I want to find here? Parts per million, I kind of like that. I see our outlet NOx sensor. I see our inlet NOx sensor. So hopefully this will show us parts per million coming out of both sensors. The inlet is usually very high. The outlet is usually hopefully closer to 0 in a perfect world. NOx conversion catalyst. Yeah, oh, actually, these are the ones we want. And this is some sort of enumeration, which means this is kind of probably what the computer calculates that it should see. Okay, so we want to see the actual parts per million. And we're going to watch these. The corrected. See our intake corrected NOx. That's fine. Now let's see if we can just type in let's see, pressure. A lot of times the more basic word you use in the search function, you get the best choices to choose from here. Oil pressure, rail pressure valve, barometric pressure. No, I don't want any of that stuff. Let's skip down and see pressure. No. ACM pressure. Okay, so ambient air pressure is something the ACM should be monitoring. The DOC inlet pressure, DPF outlet pressure. That's the dosing pressure for the DEF. Don't really need to see that. Oil pressure, barometric. EGR, and it's not necessarily after treatment controlled. It is monitored by the after treatment not controlled injector, and that's probably all I want to see. And these are just some main items that I know will be working constantly during the regeneration. So now we'll start the regeneration and shut off this video because there's no need for you to watch a whole boring regeneration. But hopefully I'll come up with a point in time that something happened, so I will know the conditions in which this fault code goes active. So when you're tracing inactive fault codes, knowing the condition that it happens. I mean, if I had the driver right here, I'd ask him, hey buddy, exactly what was going on when this happened? And he'll be like, man, I was going uphill, you know, I was driving in the snow, and you know, it was freezing outside, and as soon as I shifted at the stoplight, or you know, just variable factors that will help you narrow it down. But I don't have the driver here, so I want to do an actual monitor regeneration and see if I can get that fault code to come back active. The minute it goes active, I'm gonna look real close at these things, and maybe lots of other things. I'll be probably looking into voltages. Like I typed in pressure here, we can type in voltage, and we can go look at a lot of the voltages for the different systems out there. After treatment control module, battery voltage, there's a very good one to, to monitor there. Tank level, a CR inlet, temp, that's not bad. I'll just choose one of those on random. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start the regen on this one. And we're gonna go ahead, clear the faults. It doesn't clear everything. Detroit has a way of keeping certain files in here that are really important. It won't let them be completely cleared. So there we go. And it came up with the one that we're actually trying to do. All our fault codes are cleared except for the one that's permanent, not currently active, which is what we're trying to recreate. Alright, so here we go. We're going to start our park regeneration. Here we go. Just for park regeneration, and we're going to monitor a few things. This is to make sure you're not parked over the top of leaves or a homeless person. Okay, the regen is complete. We were not lucky enough to set off another active fault code. I go back into my codes. It's not currently active, and it's still only 5 counts, so it did not create another count. Everything's in the cooling down mode right now, restabilizing all the temperatures. I'm gonna let it run until things are back down to about 300 or so. It sounds strange, but you let the engine cool everything back down. Oh, look at that. There we go. She's shutting down. Mission accomplished. Look at that. We lost communication. Fault code went active. All right. Now, as a disclaimer, even though it did work and my intuition and experience paid off in this situation, my disclaimer has to be the proper troubleshooting steps need to be followed completely from beginning to end as the manufacturer requires. Look at that. We lost her completely. So yeah, my intuition paid off this time, but let me reiterate. Yeah, see, it set off another one, stop receiving. And then we still have the, so we have an ACM issue that is currently active. So now we might be able to troubleshoot it. So, oh, there it went. Okay, well, at least I know that I might be able to cause to recreate this fault code with the traditional troubleshooting steps. And the reason I say that is even though we were able to get it active, it's still intermittent as hell, so it is not going to be an easy troubleshooting. Even though I can't keep it active, I should maybe during troubleshooting be able to find a definite reason why it's doing this, since it's, well, it happened in the first 45 minutes of us troubleshooting it. We were able to recreate it, so it is commonly recreatable. I say common even though once 45 minutes. So anyway, going back to my disclaimer, always follow the troubleshooting steps 100%. If you're ever in a competition, for a master technician competition, you must always follow the troubleshooting steps from the beginning to the end, even if you know the answer or know how to take a shortcut, as we did. So now that we know it is more easily recreatable than say it only happens every once a week, we were able to get it to happen in the first 45 minutes. So now we're backtracking towards my disclaimer. Now here the first steps are asking if we did any programming recently programmed, because that will set the fault. So we go, no, we didn't do that. We cannot get it to become active. So all this troubleshooting, even though I threw out that disclaimer, all this troubleshooting I skipped over and went right to trying to recreate it, because all this troubleshooting relies on a very important fact, that the fault code is currently active. So even though I say you have to do all the troubleshooting from A to B, from 1 to 100, you can't if it's not active. All this relies on it being active. See, it says, did it become active again? Yes, go to step 4. No, the fault code was only set during reprogramming. You are done. So we're going to be doing a lot of resistance measurements, but like I said, the fault code is not currently active. So these resistance measurements are going to be just fine, unless I can do, a certain wiggle or a push or pull on a wire and create the problem again while I'm testing. So basically I'm testing the circuits, but I'm not necessarily looking for resistance problems because we currently don't have an active problem. What I'll be looking for is trying to recreate that problem through my testing. Okay, so the first step in the troubleshooting was to check at the after treatment control module connector to pull it out, check for bent, spread, corroded pins. And I agree with that. That's where I would start my troubleshooting also at this point, because this area is subject to the high heat of the after treatment. The after treatment control module is encased behind it in this box, which we're going to remove. And it's subject to all the heat, vibration from back here. It's also, this is where a technician probably was in and out of here replacing knock sensors, which are real common failure items, testing after treatment previously. So this is just a real high suspect area to have vibration and other common corrosion issues. So we're going to take the box off, expose the after treatment module. It's all just 10mm bolts all the way around the cover. Always rule out human error, especially in the heavy duty business where a lot of different techs might be working on the same fault code, think they fixed it, send it down the road. I found a good clue. I'm looking at all these case bolts. They all should be this size. And I just pulled out this really long bolt right out of the top of the cover. That is not where this bolt goes. This bolt is a knock sensor bolt. And here we go. See this clamp right here? Does not even have a bolt, it's not even attached. It's because this bolt holds the knock sensor in from the inside, then the nut goes on the outside. I noticed the mounting bolts for this cover, one was missing on this side, one was missing on the outside. Earlier I showed you the bolt missing, or the wrong place in the top. The professional puts all the nuts and bolts back the way they were supposed to be. Here we're looking at the after treatment control module. The ACM has two connectors, like a larger one on top, small one on bottom. This I believe is a sensor module back here, particulate matter. Up inside of here you would have to take this top cover off also. Up inside of here is where the knock sensor is. So I did a quick visual on it, and yes, confirmed it is newer, not painted, it has been replaced. You can see. Okay, so we put the proper bolt back where it needed to be. This is the outlet knock sensor. We've checked some of the wiring here, looking for rubbing, chafing, exposed wires, and everything looks pretty legit at this point. There's a couple suspect spots right here. It was rubbing, and in all their infinite wisdom, Freightliner decided to put their wiring harness right here directly on top of the hottest part of the engine. You can see there's not even an inch clearance between the harness and where it connects through these bulkhead fittings here to connect to the harness that goes to the truck's MCM and everywhere else it goes. So it runs on top of the transmission, crosses over the top of the transmission, and ends up on the other side of the truck. So we're gonna crawl back under the truck and look for any chafing on that side. I'm gonna go grab a mirror and look on the back side of these connections for any rubbing, green or black corrosion, loose wires or anything like that. Try to get real up close and personal, look for any signs of burning or chafing or broken wires on this setup. And while I do this part, everything is still connected. I haven't disconnected and looked for bent spread pins or anything as it says to do in step 1, because that's just not very often the case. I don't see any sign that anybody has taken the harnesses off of the after treatment control module. I'm gonna look at this first, as it's more suspect to me. In this area, it runs up here also to these front sensors, but we're looking for a power supply problem, which means either coming from the truck, there's a power supply problem, or internal fault in the after treatment control module itself. I forgot to mention, with everything else plugged back in, nothing is unplugged. We shouldn't have any fault codes because our fault code has been inactive except for during extreme conditions. So what I'm doing is I'm gonna go turn the key on, and I know I won't create any more further fault codes because everything is currently plugged in. And while I'm doing visual inspections on everything that I suspect, I will do a push, pull, wiggle, looking at individual wires, getting my fingers in everything and getting my hands on everything with push, pull tests and wiggle tests. And wiggle tests sounds silly, but sometimes that will save the day, because I'll go look back in the computer and find another 1 or 2 or maybe more fault codes registered, counts. So we had 5 counts before of the ACM losing its power. What if we go through and wiggle this section, go back, check the computer, and see we have 6 counts, then we stop where we were and come right back to where we just were doing all our wiggle tests and try to find that wiggle spot that was suspect. Looks like we might have this one figured out here on the top of the DPF, where I did all my wiggle tests. This time I went back and did push-pull tests. And on the back side of this connector, I went and pulled it, and sucker popped right out. Those certainly look like they're power terminals. So now we'll go back to the laptop. Check it out. The only fault codes that came back active are the exact 2 that have been shutting down the truck. Now let's go plug it back in. All right, we'll reach up in here and plug it back in. And there's just something wrong with the connector itself. Like the lock ears on the side aren't completely locking in. So it's plugged back in, and the faults are inactive. I think we feel confident enough at this point to know that that is probably our issue. I put not much of a tug on that thing at all, and it came right out. Like the little detents on the side aren't even attempting to hold that plug in place. And it was just right at that point where it's right at that exhaust bend where it got enough heat where it failed connection there. Something expanded from the heat probably during the regens or heavy road use, hard pull. So we're going to basically secure that by pulling the plug back out, seeing if we can get those detented sections, the little locks. I think they're on both sides of those connectors. If you squeeze in both sides, it comes off. See if we can get them back, like stretch back out to a point where it will lock, and then of course secure the whole thing with some nice thick wire ties. I wouldn't use little wire ties right there. They're probably gonna become brittle with all that heat, but the big ones should last a long time. Put 1 or 2, maybe even 3, hold that sucker in place, and should be good to go.